Hi, Jerry.
Hi there.
So I'm here with Jerry Izenberg, consummate sports writer, newspaperman, who happens to be 93. And with, tell us, Jerry, how many books under your belt and how many years with the Newark Star Ledger?
Well, my whole journalistic career, part of it was with the New York Herald Tribune, which is where I really learned stuff. This is my 73rd year in the business. I've
And
done 15 books.
that's all?
That's all at the moment. I would like to do more, but we'll see. I've got in my drawer here, I have one unpublished manuscript, which I'm probably going to send out based on the success of the one that's out there now, Larry Doby in black and white.
So what's this next one about? What's
I
the
don't
what should
know.
we expect? No, what should we
We're
expect?
going to
What's
hold a contest at the end of this, and everybody writing what they think I should write about. And I'll tell you, I'll go to hell and I'll write what I want to write. That's all I
well,
can say about that.
well, not only have you had a long career, but you've had one that is so singularly defined by your personality. You're not bound by, let's say, writing for the New York Times, where you have to fit in a particular mold. Um, Tell us about what makes your writing so unique.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say about that particular mold is you're interviewing the only person who ever said to the New York Times, "No, I will not accept your offer and I will never be there." Um, when I was a kid in the business, I've been in about 5, 6 years, back from the Korean War. And I wrote a letter. In those days, the Times was ahead of everybody else in only one respect. They already had this stupid idea of human resources. So you got hired by the human resource person who didn't know what your job was in the first place. And I wrote to the human resource person, and he wrote back and said, "We like our writers to have more experience, more polish." He didn't say a bigger vocabulary because you only got to say no words. Anyway, he said, "Try again in a year or two." Well, I went to the Herald Tribune instead. I was at the Ledger, then I went to the Tribune. Marvelous guy named Stanley Woodward, the greatest editor who ever lived. And he too never worked for the New York Times. And he taught me anything I know about newspapers. And I was there a few years, and one thing led to another. And Jim Roche, a wonderful guy, race writer, New York Times, became a sports editor. The first one I ever met over there who knew what he was doing. And called me up and said, "We're going to redo the whole sports section. I got to have you working here." And I said, "Not this year, not this life." He said, "Well, why?" I said, "Jim, I love you. I would love to work for you. You're talented. But you're hiring me because you like the way I write. And in another week, I will be told after I join the staff that I'm writing all wrong. So I have no time to learn all over again." So I never went. At that point, I stayed with the Ledger until uh, I retired in a fake retirement and got a title, columnist emeritus. So I keep writing at a more reduced schedule for them.
So in your columns, you do have very definite opinions and a
Oh,
very definite style. I guess that's an understatement.
well,
Um,
go ahead.
no, I was waiting for you to
Well,
go. Go ahead.
if you think I had definite opinions, I will tell you someone else did too. Because when I was defending Muhammad Ali, probably 2 years before Howard Cosell knew who he was, and a lot of people didn't like that. When I wrote my first defense, all I was defending was the American system, the Constitution, which I hope after this election we can still keep it. And it was very simple. Everybody had rights. And Ali had the right to appeal through the court system, and that's what I was defending. Everybody wanted to send him to Alcatraz, Leavenworth actually, but he didn't get a fair hearing yet. So I came out and defended him. When I was a little kid, people think I used to stay up late at night, hide in the pantry. We didn't have a pantry, but it sounds good. Hide in the pantry with listening to the radio to ball games. No, I didn't listen to ball games or fights or anything else. I was a little kid. What I listened to was a thing called Town Meeting of the Air. Some of the greatest minds in America would debate a subject. I mean, a real debate, not like the fake presidential debates. I'm listening, and Everett Dirksen, who is a voice of the Angels, Illinois, he's a senator. He's debating Alvin Barkley, who is about to become vice president of the United States. And the subject is the Constitution obsolete? I wish all of today's candidates could get a recording of that. So Dirksen explained why there might need to be some more modifications. And Barkley says, no, no, no. He says, the Constitution of this country is not old, it's not outworn, it's not outdated. On the day it does become, the people will put it in a dusty back room and leave it there and write a new one. But right now, it's a pretty good one. That debate stayed in my mind, God, 50, 60 years. Because the first piece I wrote defending Ali was called With Liberty and Justice for All. In those days, I used to write my own headlines. And it defended his right to do what he was doing to the appellate system. Well, we got 4,000. I was syndicated all around the country and actually in Italy, in Mexico, in Canada, and in Thailand, and a few other places. We got 4,000 letters, and I said, don't send these to me anymore because they're all going to read the same. Dear Jew Bastard, and at the very end, it's going to say, yours in sports, a U.S. Army veteran. Well, I by then was a U.S. Army veteran myself, and we still managed not to lose the Korean War. So I have to think that we had a pretty good army. In any event, I said, don't send these anymore. I'm not interested in reading them. I'm not. I got one. I used to joke about it. I said, I got one letter that agreed with me, and the guy said, I'm sorry, I'm writing in crayon, but they don't allow me to have sharp pencils where they got me hidden. All right, so then that first year, I was sitting in my office at home, and my son ran in. He said, "You gotta get." He couldn't speak. The porch. So I went on the porch. Two guys with sledgehammers are breaking out my windshield. They
Wow.
came. Then they run back into a gray Toyota. They're gone. Well, I figured I got to call the cops. I was not a very popular guy. When the police officer said to me, "Well, do you think there are people who might have done this?" I said, "Well, obviously, my first clue that there are people who did this was when the windshield was broken. So I can't help you anymore. Is finding someone who doesn't like me is very much like going to the delicatessen on Sunday morning and the guy goes, 'Hey, take a number. You're 38th in line.'" So that's the way I started out. I always wrote about what I thought. I wrote about what I believed in. Um, I once in a while they took me off the leash and said, "Well, go to the." I did 5 political conventions. Go to them, or go to Cape Canaveral and watch the launching and something like that. Those kind of things, special things. Well, this watch just came back on my wrist about 25 years ago for the first time because the cops broke my left wrist at the convention in Chicago, 1968. Um, and a lot of people complained about me to the point where the editor of our paper said, "Listen, you stay with bats and balls. I'm not sending you out to cover stuff that you have opinions on," which I thought was a tremendous compliment. In any event, they did send me to Cape Canaveral to cover a launching. And instead of going to the Cape, I went to the beach. And on the beach, I
Oh,
saw the hookers, the beer drinkers, the topless people, everybody having a wonderful time watching these rockets go up. To me, that was the story of the rocket because most of them didn't get up anyway at that point.
so
And now, without running amok here, what do you want to know?
but how much freedom did you have to write at the Star Ledger in terms of stories? Was anything ever turned down?
Oh
Were
no,
you
I stopped auditioning when I was a correspondent calling in game stores in college when I was 20 years old, 19 years old. No, I never had that stuff. It didn't mean a thing to me. But I did learn one thing about where I had been on the wrong track. I mentioned Stanley Woodward, a great, great man. He's interviewing me. I was working at a little paper called the Patterson Evening News at that point. I'd come back from Korea. I had been at the Leisure 4 years earlier, which I never got credit for. And uh, I couldn't get a job. No, so I got a job in a weekly paper, and then I got another job at the Patterson News. And now I'm looking to get out of there. I've got a wife, two kids, a dog, and I'm making. When I was in Patterson, I'm making $76 a week.
Wow.
So I said, I can't live on this. Stanley Woodward, I read in the paper, is coming to the Star Ledger, and I knew his reputation because he'd been at the Tribune, got fired for fighting with the editors all the time, went to Miami, took the Miami News, a terrible paper, made it respectable for a while, came back to the Star Ledger. I want to work for him, I decide. I go in, we do the whole interview, and then Stanley says to me at the very end, he said, "Well, I'm gonna read the stuff that you're writing now." I'm thinking, yeah, he's gonna buy the Patterson News, which is ridiculous. It didn't
But
circulate beyond the borders of Patterson, and I'm in Newark being interviewed. So okay, he says, "I got to ask you one more question, very important question, maybe the most important question. You're in this business. Why do you want to stay in it?" Oh, that's my moment to shine.
yeah.
Stanley, Mr. Woodward, sir, I have always wanted to be a journalist. He looks at me like he's about to scrape dog crap off the sole of his shoe. And he said, "You're in the wrong building, son. We don't have any journalists here." Samuel Pepys, the Elizabethan, he was a journalist because he had a little diary he wrote early up in the morning. I went here. That's a journalist. In this building, all we have is newspapermen. But I'll tell you what, if you want to be a journalist, go over to the New York Times. First, buy a three-piece suit, get a Phi Beta Kappa key, you can get it at a pawn shop, and then present yourself there and say, "I want to be a journalist." They'll send you to Switzerland to cover financial thing in the future of cantaloupe on the market, and then you'll be a journalist. But if I do hire you, make understand this: don't make a mistake, because if you think you're a journalist, I'll fire you. And when that came back to me in my mind, when not too long ago, my wife and I bought our grave sites. And it's a place with the plaques in the ground. What do you want on the plaque? Well, it's the usual, you know, loyal husband, loving father, this, that. Not too much space. It's in the ground. And at the bottom, I have one sentence: a newspaper man. That's what I was. That's what I still am in my heart. And that's what want to be remembered as. One line: a newspaper man. And earlier in my career, there was a wonderful writer named W.C. Hines.
Oh, I love Bill Hines.
Uh,
I have letters from him. I love his work.
well, he was a columnist at the World Telegram and Sun, but he got out and he wrote books. He
Yes,
wrote a
he did.
book called A Day in the Life of a Surgeon, which is translated into 13 languages.
And
I
that became
respected this guy so much.
Jerry, let
He,
me interrupt for a second. That book was later adapted into MASH.
no, not that.
Yes, the
I
I'm
don't
pretty,
know. That's somebody like Fred Sternberg putting out publicity. I don't know how it happened. MASH is as far from the surgeon as you can be. He's operating on people who are about to die, not because of gunshot wounds,
oh,
because he's a
uh,
heart specialist. But Bill Hines did write the book MASH, but
yes.
he did, but it didn't resemble the surgeon was really
Okay,
square
that must.
business about medicine. He could do anything. And one day we're having a drink at Toots Shores, which is where most of the reporters went. The ones who became very important and worked for prestigious papers went further up on the east side to fashionable literary bars. We drank at Shores. And he said to me, "Listen, kid, I read the Herald Tribune every day." He was by then long gone as far as newspapers went. He said, "You didn't ask me, but I got to tell you because I don't want to see something go to waste. You got to get out of the newspaper business and out of sports. You got to write to the ability that I read in the lines that you do in the Tribune." And I said, "But if I stay there, He said, if you stay there, you will always be a 7 inning writer. Most prophetic thing anybody ever told me, because that's what I am, a 7 inning writer. I didn't write the great American novel. Uh, when you're writing how many hits Joe Smith got today, you're not writing things about. And the truth is, everything I wrote for the newspaper, and still always lines the garbage pail. So there's no false modesty on my part, right? But he gave me the right advice. I often wonder what would have happened, but I can't spend my life at 93. Who knows how much is left? I can't spend my life wondering what I could have been. I got to try to live up to what Stanley Woodward thought I should have been.
But Jerry, a question about being 93. How do you feel about the passage of time at this point in your life?
I don't have time to stop and think about it. On my desk, I've done 15 books. I hope to sell that 16th that's in the drawer over here. But on my desk is a sheet of paper. It's got 8 potential titles on it. That's 8 more books I would hope I have enough time to write. I know I'm realistic. I know I can't write all 8 of them. And right now I'm wrestling with myself about what will be the one after the one that's out now.
So, how do you look upon your colleagues? Have you outlived everyone that you started out?
Well, I'm sure I'm the oldest columnist in America. I must be on a daily paper. But I don't know. Somebody once got in an argument with me about something at a time when most of the good sports writers were gone, most of them. And he said, well, you and your colleagues, I said, please, do not call them my colleagues. There are too many people in the business who I do not wish to be a colleague of. It's a lost art. The business is a dying thing. But I'll tell you what, if I were to write one book about this business, about the business itself, it would be Newspaper's Autopsy, death by suicide. They were scared crapless by when the television came in. Then they got angry. My editor, not my sports editor, the guy who ran the Star Ledger at that time, Mort Pryor, good newspaperman, said to me, I don't touch your stuff. It's in my contract. But I was tempted to yesterday. You used the starting time of the World Series and the channel that it was on. I said, yeah. He said, we don't, that's the people who are trying to bury us. Don't you understand that? I said, I understand one thing. Because they're out there, they're not burying Jerry because they put the whole game out there. I don't have to tell anybody who cares about the World Series watched it. I don't have to tell them who won. I don't have to tell them what the score was. And if it was won on a rally in the last second, I don't have to tell them that. They saw it all. I can write what I think they need to know.
Well, speaking of the sports sections, the New York Times did away with its sports section in favor of the Athletic. Bob Lipsyte was furious. So many people worked for that section. It has this amazing history. How did you feel about that change in the business?
Well, it's not a change in the business, although the New York Times would like to think everything it does is a change in the business. No, it's not a change in the business, but it's for the worse anyway. It took them a long time to get there. All those years I didn't want to work there, but they got some good guys. They had some talented people for quite a number of years now, starting with Jim Roach's editorship. And I don't feel, they're not trendsetters. People may copy them and buy up other internet things. They'll do that because the Times did it. To me, they're not the paper of record. To me, the Washington Post is the paper of record. But that's to me, and newspapers are subjective. But I think it's insulting to do what they do. I'm not insulting the Athletic, by the way. They're always they're growing and they're finding out who they are and they're doing a lot of things. It's not the point. They had gone from the worst sports section I ever read in my life to outstanding. Once they ended that experiment called Monday Sports. I remember a guy, I won't mention his name, I shouldn't, but he was in charge of it. And he remember him being quoted. All the other papers ran to quote him. What's the Times going to do with something Monday Sports? And he said, I'm going to find out everything that readers really want to know. Well, what he really wanted to find out was everything a 46-year-old man who didn't know a lot about sports wanted to know. When I look at the very first edition, in it, or the early editions, in it was, what does the vigorous mean in gambling? Now, if you don't know what the vigorous means in gambling, you don't need to know. You don't need to know, because you're never going to learn. You're never going to bet. You're not going to need it. Anybody who is a real sports fan knows exactly what it was, except him. So they didn't pioneer anything with that. And also, I noticed I could buy any Monday, and the Sports Monday is not in there anymore.
Now, going back to your career specifically, is there one interview or others that got away that you wish you had the opportunity, that for whatever circumstances you weren't able to connect?
I would say probably Christy Matheson, who was dead long before I came along. I would say Newt Rockney. The only interview there are, people always say to me in the business, some of them will say, he's a bad interview. Don't waste your time on that. Nobody is a bad interview, only bad interviewers. Look at the television interviews today. I see people sitting with big clipboards, ask them this, ask them that, ask them that. And so I used to teach for 4 years, 2 years at Rutgers and 2 years at the New School for, it used to be called the New School for Science Research or something, but it was a good place. And I used to tell them, look, this is the way, now remember, this is the 60s and 70s. I exempt people like Walter Cronkite, like William Shire, like the guy, the pioneer who did the piece on Coca-Cola and had it. He was dominated all of television. I'm sorry, but I'm 93. The name doesn't come to me.
Were you thinking of Mike Wallace?
No, it's well before Mike Wallace.
Oh,
This is
Edward R. Murrow?
Edward R. Murrow.
Okay.
Yeah. They were not journalists. They were reporters. They were verbal columnists. They didn't write, and they were good. But this is a typical television interview from that period. The interviewer, sex is no issue one way or the other, has got this clipboard. And the guy says, don't you understand? I hated my wife. I couldn't stand her. I couldn't be near her. I couldn't listen to that screechy voice. So I went to the cellar. I got an axe and I cut her head off. And then the interviewer says, you went to Oberlin University, didn't you? Because that's question number 2 on the interview list.
Yes.
There's no such thing as a bad interview. We got some good ones out there in television, certainly. And we have even a few more among newspapers, but minuscule compared to the number we used to have. That's the loss for America. When I did the Doby book, Larry Jr., the son, I told him, I said, I didn't, and he knew me, that Larry and I were friends for 35 years. I was in their house, Larry was in mine. But I felt that the Dobys as a family, that the Doby side of the family, they grew up, most of them, in Camden, South Carolina. Not his kids and those contemporaries, but going back. Larry grew up in Camden, and the first 13 of his years in segregated Camden. That's how he lived. I said to Jerry, I'm going to have a little trouble with the Doby side. I don't know much about the Camden, South Carolina Dobys. He said, Mr. Izenberg, I will gladly help you. And I want you to know why I'm helping you. My father had a very hard life. And for people who don't know who he is, that's the reason he had a hard life. they wouldn't write about him. He fell through the cracks. 80, first black in the American League, second black in baseball, same year as Jackie. Jackie's uniform, and I'm not knocking Jackie, who went to hell. His uniform number can't be used in in any league anymore. It's retired because he was the first. Larry's uniform is retired only in Cleveland, number 14. And the honors are very slow in coming to Larry. Some of them never came. Jackie got into the Hall of Fame the first year he was eligible, and he deserved it. Larry got into the Hall of Fame when he was 78 years old, and he got in because the Veterans Committee voted him in. And I'm going to tell you a little self-aggrandizement, a little self-chauvinism here, so that maybe we'll want to go out and buy my book, Larry Doby, in black and white, the story of a baseball pioneer. I wrote every year when he came, after the first of all, the writers wouldn't vote him in. And I said, I'm arguing with a guy I really respect, but baseball writers, as we know them, many of them should carry around large legal briefcases where they keep their decimal points, because that's all many of them are seeing is the decimal points, the averages. That's an achievement in one way. Living what Larry lived through, it's a vast different achievement. Although his numbers weren't that bad. In fact, they were good. But anyway, I'm arguing with a guy in a Hall of Fame guy, and he says to me, but you don't understand the Hall of Fame. Larry doesn't have the numbers. So I said to the guy, look, let me give you Tris Speaker, Hannes Wagner, and Ty Cobb. Take their numbers. Look at them. And then you tell me what their numbers might have been if their wife and their children were getting death threats on the telephone every freaking night of the first season. And he said, but that's a different thing. Yeah, it is, but it's not a different thing. So I fought for him. And then I went to the Veterans Committee. They're the last resort to get you. And if you don't get in there, you don't get in. And they hadn't put him in yet. And I'd written 2 or 3 columns. And Larry said to me, we were this close. Jerry, I want you to do me a big favor. I want you to stop writing about the Hall of Fame and me. I am never going to get in there, number one. Number two, you don't embarrass me. I'm flattered, but I don't want you to embarrass yourself. I said, one more time. I'm going to do it one more time. I wrote this column. I was as nasty as I could be. It was an open letter to the Veterans Committee, and the first sentence was, why am I not surprised that some of you sons of bitches wouldn't vote him in? Because you didn't want him to bat 1 inning in the first place when he was still black all through it. And then I photocopied the column. It ran in the paper. Then I photocopied it. I sent it to everybody on the committee. I said, make me a liar. I got one answer. This is the way the answer started. Dear asshole, Monty Irvin, Yogi Berra, and me. We've been trying to get him in the Hall of Fame since we got on this committee. So get your fat ass off the couch and get us some of the votes we need. And it was signed Ted Williams.
That's
He
amazing.
got in. He got in that year. Larry thinks I got him in, and I wouldn't correct him. But Ted got him in. Ted and Monty and Yogi.
Jerry, in reading your book, I was struck by several things, but I was really felt the isolation that Doby felt. You described that very well. Not only the isolation, but many times people hear the word racism or discrimination, and those are words, but you were very, very descriptive in how he was attacked and how people felt towards him.
You can't run away from the truth. You can. We make a tradition out of running away from the truth if the truth doesn't suit our needs. But you really can't run from it if you're honest. Name me another baseball player. He's in a batter's circle in segregated St. Louis, Missouri. on one knee, like all traditionally, waiting for the current batter to either make out or whatever. A guy in the front row in this segregated town has got a little megaphone and he's hollering, "Nigger, nigger, nigger." And when Larry told me the story years later, I didn't know this story. And a lot of people still don't know it. And he said, that didn't bother me. I was well beyond, I heard enough of that already before I got to St. Louis. But then the guy said, he's uppity. And if you think he's uppity, you should meet his wife, Helen. She spells her name Helyn. And I got to tell you now what she did for me in my hotel room last night. That was it. Larry jumps up. He's got one leg over the railing. He's going to get this guy. This girl was his high school sweetheart.
Oh.
And suddenly he's flying backwards. He's on his back on the ground, and on top of him is a bench coach, and he's a combination bench and pitching coach, who was one of the 5 guys who shook his hand when he got there. His name was pardon me. He's one of the 5 guys who shook his hand, and his name was Bill McKechnie. He later became a Hall of Fame manager. McKechnie's laying on top of him, and he says, "Dobes, don't move. You go in the stands. You'll never play another game of baseball." But more than that, this is the American League. They hate your skin color. They hate the fact that you got in here. They hate the fact that Bill Veeck signed you. And they hate you. We won't get another black player in the American League for 10 years unless you stay right where you are. And when Doby told me a story, he said, that was the first time he saved my career. The second time is even more fascinating. The manager wouldn't use him. He used him in very few games. Pinch hitter, pinch runner, played one full game in the field. I don't think the manager was Lou Boudreau, great player, Hall of Famer, but I really personally think he detested Larry. That's my view, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, the season ends. They're packing up to go home now, and McKechnie is packing up too, and he says to "Come here. You didn't make this team. You know that." "Well, I didn't hit because I didn't bat. I only batted 157 because I only got so many 19 at bats. Mostly as a pincher." He said, "Don't give me the excuses. You didn't make this team because he wouldn't use you. Now I'm going to tell you, that's between you and me. I got to get an employment check too. But I'll tell you something else. We have the worst outfielders in this league, and we're going to have to make trades to make it respectable. You go home. I don't know how you're going to do this. You learn to play the outfielder in the winter. You come back. You ask Boudreau for a shot at the outfield. He's got to say yes because he knows he's got nothing. Try it." Well, meanwhile, it develops. The whole front office wants to get rid of Doby. They say it's never going to develop. Send him out to the minors. Or get rid of him. Cut him. We don't need him. Bill Veeck still had the faith. Bill Veeck knew it. He spoke to the right people early, and he knew what Doby could be. So he had signed a guy named Tris Speaker, who was one of the greatest center fielders of all time, with the Red Sox, who had come over to Cleveland and been a playing manager years earlier. Now he was selling booze to bartenders, people in bars. And not people, but people who own bars. And Veeck goes out and hires him. He hires him, he says, to be the goodwill ambassador for the Indians, make speeches, be in the community. But I believe he knew what he was going to do. When it came the following year, he told Speaker, tear up your speeches. You're going to teach that young man sitting over there, you're going to teach him to play the outfield. And it saved his career. Now, Larry had spent the winter having high school kids hit him fungos in the snow at the high school field. He went to the library and he said, "You got any books on outfielders?" She gave him a book that was written by Tommy Henrik, who was called Old Reliable. He was the right fielder for the championship Yankees. He read the book. He risked pneumonia chasing those fly balls. He came back and he said to Boudreau, "I want a chance to play the outfield." And Boudreau I think it was bigoted, but he wasn't stupid. He knew he needed outfield. He said, "You want to try? Go ahead, you try. We'll give you a shot." Now, Speaker is going to teach him. Spring training in another segregated place, Tucson, Arizona. Can't live with the team, can't eat with the team. And Speaker is his mentor. Speaker knows his job because he was great at it. But one thing Monty didn't know, one thing Larry didn't know, and Vet didn't know, was that as a younger man in Humble, Texas, Speaker had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, he's got an adopted kid who's going to play center field with everything he teaches. They didn't know he was going to play center field, but everything that this guy can teach him. They got along brilliantly for one reason. They were so different growing up, and they spoke about their own backgrounds, which are alien to each of them, and they listened to each other, and so he listened to him when the instructions came. How good a center fielder was Larry Doby? I remember the All-Star game when Mickey Mantle played left field, Larry Doby played center field. The year of Willie Mays' catch, which is called the catch, and it was some catch, which decided the 1954 World Series in the very first game. It was an amazing catch. Larry made a better catch, according to Dizzy Dean, 2 months earlier during the regular season. Larry always played shallow because he could run. He had speed. And the guy hits the ball. It's clearly over his head. He's backpedaling. He's racing. He's got the ball in his sights, but he's running. He gets to the wall. He jumps up. He reaches back into the stands, makes the catch, and then tries to bring his body forward, goes through the awning over the bullpen, straight through it, hits the ground, jumps up holding the ball. Dizzy Dean, a guy who mastered the double negatives and everything else as a grammarian, is doing the game of the week. He sees the catch and he says, "Look, I don't know much about this Doby guy, but whoever was pitching at that time," he said, "he should give Doby a month's pay." And he said, "I've been around." He certainly had been around World Series, Gas House guy. I never saw a catch that good. So that's how then Larry went out and people got hurt and he winds up in center field. I'll tell you something about the outfield and Larry. Well, it's more than that. It's one anecdote that has all this segregation coming together. He's in Tucson, Arizona. That's his very first spring training because he was signed the previous July. It's a segregated town. There are no other major league teams training out there. There are a couple of minor league teams from college. That's who they're playing a lot of exhibition games against. But to play against major league competition, they go to Eastern Arizona, where the Cubs, the White Sox, the Angels are in California, but that's close, and all these teams are out there. So in the morning, they get on the bus. They go all the way out there. They work out their own spring training in the morning. The afternoon, they play the game. After the game, they jump on the bus. They run to get back all the way across to Tucson, a long, long bus trip. They haven't eaten yet. About a quarter of a way away from Phoenix, which is also segregated, by the way, there's a hamburger joint. And so the whole team goes into the joint the first day of that experience. They see Doby and they say, "You can't come in here. Go to the back door. They'll give you a paper sack with a hamburger." Well, they didn't know Larry Doby. Larry looks at him and says, walks out the door, goes straight for the bus, sits there with his arms folded. He ain't going to give them a dime. Gordon sees he's not there. Gordon finds out what happened. Gordon buys a hamburger and French fries, and a drink, goes to the bus and says, "Hey, Dobes, you got to eat. You can't not eat." He said, "Let me tell you something. I'm not going to pay you back for that meal. You're going to learn a lesson just like I learned a lesson. I'm not giving these sons of bitch," or Larry wouldn't say sons of bitch, that wasn't Larry. "I'm not giving these guys one single dime. All spring training. I'll find a way to eat when I get back. And he did that all spring training till they broke camp. Now, when they broke camp, the Giants from Phoenix, they're in Tucson, they share a train. Nobody flew in those days. And they're going through the deep South, stopping in each town, playing exhibition games until they get to Columbus, Georgia. Now, they get to St. Louis, St. Louis minor league team was the Houston Buffaloes. They somehow built a humongous baseball park. I don't know why it was that big, minor league team. Larry has got, the Giants have three blacks. Larry's still the only black in the American League. So they get together, they go out to eat in the black place, and this is the way they're living. And before the game, he's talking to Monty Irvin, who he knew for years. He and Monty were on the Eagles together. They were close friends. And he said to Monty, he said, I want to hit a home run today in right center field. It's got to go there. And Monty says, why? He says, look who's sitting there. Segregated seating. They're all black. He said, if God's got any interest in me and what we're doing, I got to hit a home run there. Well, he does. And the ball just keeps going. You think it might be going out of the park. It's the deepest part of this where nobody's ever hit a ball out. And it hits the top of the wall. After the game is over, everybody showers and runs for the train. Monty Irvin, who told me the story, not Larry Doby, he would never tell it to me, runs to the outfield, climbs the fence, and goes to where the ball struck. Monty's telling me the story. He said, Jerry, I never knew a human could hit a baseball that far. And when I wrote about it in the book, I said, it was significant. It was ceremonial, but it was something else. For Doby and for Irvin, they were pointing a monumental middle finger salute at the men who run baseball. All right, now there's one more thing here. The trip's got to end. Larry said he thought they were in Columbus, Georgia. I don't think he was sure because I think he had tried to black it out of his mind all those years. Because I'd never heard the story until later on. And he said, I'm playing in the outfield. They're throwing beer cans full of beers at me and they're hitting me. So I'm saying, not me. I come in. Woodrow says to me, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be out. He said, I'm not going out there again. Woodrow was smart enough not to say anything, or he would have lost Doby then. Doby goes in, showers, comes out. The game is still going on. So he's in the clubhouse area, walking through out the door. A tall guy, three-piece suit, Phi Beta Kappa key, black guy, comes up to him and says, Mr. Doby, can I talk to you? He said, if you're not going to throw anything at me, you can talk to me as long as you want. He said, I'm the only black doctor in this town. Only black. My wife and I think it's a sin that you can't eat and sleep where everybody else does. He said, well, we want you to come to our house. My wife's a great cook. She'll cook whatever you want. And this is a tradition. At the end of the year, the Indians play 3 games here, or 2 games, 3 games, whatever it was. And we want you to stay with us every year. And he did until the airplane finally got out of the Orville Wright stage and baseball teams were now flying. So there was no train shared by the Giants and the Indians. He picks up the paper maybe 7, 8, 9 years after this happened. And he reads about a guy who got shot to death at a lunch counter sit-in. And he's the doctor. He's the doctor who had introduced himself.
So
now, he didn't tell me that story about the doctor until 2 days before he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. 2, 3 days. He said, I'm having a little trouble with my speech. I said, hey, it's your speech. You speak from the heart. You experienced it. I didn't. So don't tell me about it. He said, then he told me the story about the doctor. First time I ever heard it. Most people never heard it. And I said to him, Larry, you got to put that in your speech. You got to tell that story tomorrow at the induction. He said, wrong time, wrong place. I'm not doing it. I said, Larry, you owe this. You don't owe it to baseball. You don't owe it to the owners who don't give a crap about you. You don't owe it to the players who kept you. You owe it to the people in that crowd. They need to know why you're here. And Larry said, wrong time, wrong place. And then I said to him after that, well, how does it feel going back to inside the Hall of Fame now that you're going to be an inductee? He said, I don't know. I never went in that place. I said, you've never been in the Baseball Hall of Fame? He said, no, I was never going to get in, Jerry. Why would I go there? I said, okay, I got a surprise. I'm taking you to dinner tonight. Don't make any plans, you and Helen. My wife will go with us. We went out to dinner, and then we went to the Hall of Fame where it was closed, no lights. I had called up the guy who ran that building, and I said to him, listen, Larry's never been in this place. When are you closing? He said, 8:30 tonight. It's time enough. I said, would you open it a half hour later? For you, no, not for me. And I told him why I wanted Larry to see it. He said, you got it. Steve Edelson was his name. We get there. Our wives then sit in the lobby. They knew each other. And they're talking to each other. Now we're in the empty Hall of Fame. Now all of the audio exhibits that are in it are playing. I guess he left them on for us. Nobody else is in the building, not the janitor, nobody. And the girls are out front, sitting in the lobby, talking. And the janitor said, call me when you're finished, and I'll lock it up. It's eerie, it's surreal. We can hear our footsteps echoing through the Hall of Fame. All these great who live forever in the heart of baseball, the exhibits and this and that, and the sound of the announcers announcing stuff all through. We get to the Cleveland Indians, 1948. Larry, several things happened to Larry once he was playing the outfield, and Boudreaux stopped being Boudreaux as far as Larry was concerned. He hit 320 that year. He was a candidate to win the MVP honors. Yogi won it. And he was playing in the position he should have been in. We come to the 1948 Cleveland Indian exhibit, and he points to Boudreaux, and he said to me, there he is. He couldn't bring himself to say son of a bitch or bastard or there he is. And I don't want to talk about him. And then he took his finger and took it all the way down to the other end of the exhibit. And he said, that's Joe Gordon. That's my man. We will be friends until I die. And that's exactly the man who shook hands with him, the man who brought the food to him. That's exactly the way it was until finally Larry died. And so it was quite an evening. Now I'm wondering about the speech. Now I'll tell you this. If there were no Cooperstown, New York, who's the painter who did American Gothic?
Grant Wood.
No, the painter. Anyway, I'll think of him in a second. You can put. Norman Rockwell. He wrote about early Americana. Yeah, he was the painter. He could, if there had been no Cooperstown, he would have had invented it, because most of the year you can shoot off a cannon on Main Street and not hit anybody.
It is very quiet there.
This is Cooperstown, New York. But now it's like there was a Broadway show about a town in Ireland that came, not Ireland, Scotland, I think, came to life once a year. Glockamora. That song, How Are Things in Glockamora? Once a year, not once a year, I'm sorry, once every 10 years, it came to life for a day and disappeared. That could have been Cooperstown.
Well, Jerry, let me ask you a question, sort of piggybacking on that. There are so few Black players in baseball today. How do you raise their consciousness and the consciousness of others about the achievements and the cultural impact of Larry Doby.
You're lumping things in the same question.
Yes, I am.
One thing, yeah, but one thing belongs, the other has no place there. Why are there fewer black baseball players today in majors? It's not discrimination. It's not lack of opportunity. Black players in the inner cities. There's a program called Baseball in the Inner Cities, which baseball sponsors. There are thousands of black kids, white kids still predominant, but there are thousands of black kids playing little league baseball all over America. It isn't that they don't know how to play. It isn't that they can't play. It's that if you look at the income and the odds against you, take the number of teams, multiply it by 25 players, it's still a drop in the bucket of people. How many people play high school baseball in America? How many? Millions. And so those guys see quicker opportunity and better money as power forwards in basketball or else tight ends in football or else wide receivers where speed is an asset. They don't gravitate to the game. They want to go to the game where there's more money. Yeah, there's all these $1 million contracts and everything, but it's a limited number of guys based on the people who can play baseball. And also, the careers are much shorter and the money comes in much faster in football and basketball. So that answers that part. That question doesn't belong really in this.
Well, it does.
Teaching them about culture is something else.
Okay.
That's a whole different question. And that's the job of the schools. That's the job of every parent who lived, black or white, who knows who Larry Doby was. And a lot more of them will if they buy my book, Larry Doby in Black and White. And I want the world to know he was my friend for a long time, a long, long time.
Well,
And we shared so much. And he was the kind of guy who would share everything about his life. And they just don't know who he was. You know, in the prologue to this book, the last lines in the prologue are, "This is the book that the men who would later become my colleagues should have written, but they didn't care to." He had a tough time in Cleveland. He had a couple of adversaries in the press that were brutal to him.
but Jerry, why now? Why at 92, 93 did you decide to write it now and not years prior?
I tried to write it years prior, but I didn't really seriously try.
Why?
Monty Irvin is the reason, and Monty's gone now too.
Yeah.
Monty and he met each other in the summer when Larry was a high school freshman. There was a black semi-pro team called the Patterson Smart Set. There's a social club called Smart Set. They're black men, and they're all over America. This particular one sponsored the baseball team. And Monty was much older. Monty was the shortstop on the Smart Sets, and Larry was his second baseman. They were the double play combination. So he knew Larry when Larry was like 15 years old, and they played together. Then Monty moved on to the Eagles. Larry still finishing up in high school. When the Manley, Mr. and Mrs. Manley, they owned the Eagles. When they signed Larry, Larry was a senior in high school, 17 years old. The only person on the Eagles who knew that he was still in high school was Monty Irvin, who kept his mouth shut. Mrs. Well, she didn't call herself Mrs. Doby. They got divorced. His father died when he was 6, but they had been divorced before that. She took her maiden name. So Larry, and she was a big force. Larry was down there 13 years in South Carolina, but she couldn't make a living and support Larry. She was a domestic. In Camden, South Carolina, she would have gotten $5 a day. She went to Ridgewood, New Jersey, which at that time, it still is a nice place, but it was at an upper class level.
Mhm.
And there she was a domestic, a live-in domestic with a better salary, meals, and everything else. And she left Larry in South Carolina in the custody of his paternal grandmother, who eventually got dementia. Larry found her in the woods. Effa, that's her name. Etta, that was her name. Etta Doby gets on a bus, back down again for another team meeting. What are we going to do? How are we going to raise this kid? Her sister-in-law says, "I'll take him." And don't worry about this because my husband is in the house. My husband can take care of that too. In all his years, ever until he was a man on his own, he was always raised by women, which meant a lot as to who Larry Doby became. After that, after he left South Carolina, he came up to Patterson because his mother said, "You're coming up whether you want to come up or not." And he didn't want to come up. Oh, his friends were down there. He played baseball down there. He was so good at baseball at that age. There was a guy named Rick DuBose. He was Mr. Baseball of South Carolina. In Camden, he had the private school team. He had the black private school, the public school team. He had the Little League team. He had the American Legion team. And he had a team of men called the Camden Sluggers. And he thought so much of Larry, he sneaked them onto the roster. These were men. And when they traveled, and if the game was one-sided, he'd put Larry in, whichever way, to give him some experience. Larry was a 12-year-old kid playing against and with grown men at that point. His mother said, "No high school in Camden for you. You're coming up to the
Hmm.
east where you can get a fair shake." He gets up there and she puts him in Patterson High School, which was a new school. It was only like 10, 12 years old. And there are 20 blacks in this school, maybe
Now, Jerry, I
23.
did want to say you're giving away the book. You're
That's okay.
telling us everything that's in this book. You
No,
make sure you
no,
leave
no.
something for
Yeah,
people.
yeah, but listen, that's not important. It's important that they know. This might make them want to read the book. I'm not going to his whole career in high school. I'm not going to that, but I'm saying this. He was great. All state football, all state basketball, all state baseball, and ran track. So he was great. So when Adobe saw it, when the Manley saw him, Abe said, "I want to sign this kid." And the mother laid down some ground rules. She never talked about salary, talked about the ground rules. You got a men's team playing men's game and doing what men do after the games. He's got to be protected, and she laid down the ground rules for that. And it was very interesting because and Monty kept his mouth shut, never talked. One thing I will tell you, they changed his name. He had a 4-year basketball scholarship to LIU.
Wow.
Claire B., one of the greats of all time, coached that team, and he saw him play and he gave him a scholarship. Well, Jim Thorpe played summer baseball in North Carolina, and he got paid. Therefore, he was no longer an amateur. They took his medals away, and she challenged Manning. She said, "I'm not turning him into Jim Thorpe." And Manley said, "Don't worry, son, you're not Larry Doby anymore. You're Larry Walker from Crenshaw High School in Los Angeles, California. That's who you'll be." I bring this up for something that's in the book. He played a whole year as Larry Walker. Now, when they put all the statistics together, lump the black statistics with the major league statistics, put them all together. Everybody's average went up because they were great players. But I never knew what happened to Larry Walker. He that his whole first year with the Eagles when he was really good, he was Larry Walker. I don't know if they took Larry Walker's stats and put him in with Larry Doby's. That I'm going to find out.
Well, you have met so many sports people. Ray Arcel, who was a good friend of yours, Larry Doby. Who do you miss the most? Who do you miss talking to on a regular basis?
I only miss the ones I could talk to on a regular basis because who are the people who are my three best friends? and I talked to them the most because they were right where two of them were where I was. Larry Doby, Montclair, New Jersey, where I lived for a while. Monty Irvin, Orange, New Jersey. And Muhammad Ali, a citizen of the world. They were my three best friends. Ali and I, we didn't really talk. He confided in me in a lot of things, but we collaborated on practical jokes against all the other guys that were around. But Monty and Larry are the ones I miss. I'll tell you how much I miss them. Well, you know a little bit of this because you know how long Larry and I were friends. Monty Irvin and I were friends even longer. And Monty was Larry was dead. Well, I'll give you the history of it. Why this book was written? You asked me originally why I wrote it now. Monty Irvin's the reason that book got written at all. I wanted to write a book on Larry, and I talked to Monty about it. I said, I haven't told Larry about it yet, but I want to do it. And he said, you got to do it. I'm fine. Larry dies. Monty and I come. Monty's in a wheelchair in a baseball stadium in New Jersey, and I'm throwing out the first ball or whatever I did there. And I go over and I hug him, and we're brothers. We really were. And Monty says, how's the book coming? I said, Monty, I got to tell you, I haven't really. He said, you got to do that book. But listen to me. You cannot die. I said, I don't even know what the hell you're saying. He said, you cannot die. You're the last writer in the world who saw us play in the black leagues. And you occasionally write about us now, which means you're keeping us alive. When young black kids say, well, they never gave you a league, you would never get. They can read you and they'll know. And you got to finish that book. Shortly after that, he went into assisted living in Houston, Texas. And in Houston, we talked a lot on the phone. But toward the end, when he knew the end was coming, he left a note on his desk for his daughter. And it said, if I should pass during the night, please tell Jerry. I'd already started the book, but that note made me finish it.
Can you dial back just a little bit? And when you spoke of Muhammad Ali and practical jokes, are you okay, Jerry?
What?
Are you okay? I saw you rubbing your head. I want to make
No,
sure.
nothing the matter. Hey, I'm old. I'm not dead. Go ahead.
um, but going back to what you mentioned about Muhammad Ali and practical jokes, could you give us a few examples?
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. Boudini, the cheerleader in that corner. He's with us. Ali has just purchased Al Capone's old farm in Michigan. And we're walking around. And I say to Ali, you know, um, they say his money is buried out here. And then Ali winks and looks at me. Now I realize where we're going. He said, you mean in the ground, right? Somebody's going to find that. Now I get into it. Somebody's going to find that money. I know. The next day, we're taking a walk out there. There's holes in the ground. Boudini heard us and he's looking for the money. He dug up holes looking for the money. We did a lot like that. I gave Ali my bed.
You did?
Yeah. We were in, they were going to go upstate, New York State. A guy, I forget his name, and I don't want to remember his name. He was an assemblyman in New York State, and he had a bill to outlaw boxing as brutality. And so John Condon, who was running the Garden publicity, said, why don't you come up there with us? You might get a story. Oh, I'd love to. Well, so we go up there. Ali testifies that he's absolutely brilliant. This guy said to him, you're fake. You're fake. Oh, the other people tell, but Ali stole the show. Of course, he always teaches Ali.
It-
He said, "You're fake. You're telling me what round the fight's going to end in. Those fights have to be fixed, aren't they?" And he says, "No." He said, you read the Bible, sir? There are prophets in the Bible. I am a prophet of boxing. I just know these things. The guy said, "Doesn't sound like right to me." And he said, "Look, on the other hand," he said, "I know you were in boxing for a little while. You boxed a little bit." And he said, "You're telling me I'm a thief? I'll tell you what my mother taught me. It take a thief to catch a thief, so I think you qualify." That was on the floor of the state legislature in New York State. We knew each other well, and uh, I'll tell you one thing Ali did for me. They needed Ali to be a speaker at a big charity event in New Jersey. They came to me. The guy came to me who was behind the speaker, the guy who funded the thing. And he said, "You got to, I'll fly my private plane to South Bend, Indiana, which is right across from Grand Rapids, where Ali was at the time." And he said, I'll fly him back. I'll give him $10,000. Well, now I wouldn't have said it, but now I got to tell Ali because it's a $10,000 offer. Ali says, "What you did for me, I'll be there. I'll be there." We get there. The dinner's a disaster. It goes on for, it seems like days. And now it's Ali's turn to get up and speak. And I have designed a way out because he's not speaking well at all at that point. I did a 3 minute, what would you call it? 3 minute short on Ali's life on tape. And had put a tape as a souvenir at everybody's place. The lights went out, and I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, listen to Muhammad Ali." And we played the tape. They thought they heard him. Now that's over. Ali gets up. He says, "Where's the lady with the money?" I said, "Over there." He said, "Get her over here." And she comes over. "Oh, Mr. What a great to meet you." And he said, "Never mind that. What's the name?" Says to me, "What's the name of your organization?" And I said, "It's called Project Pride." Because we had played a football game for charity 29 years. We sent 1,100 Newark kids to college. We sent kids to Washington. It was a tremendous undertaking. I told him Project Pride Incorporated. He said, "This check's made out to me." He said, "Miss, could you write another check? Make it out to Project Pride." Handed me the $10,000, and we needed it.
Oh, that's a fabulous
But
story.
I'll tell you one that's related to it. Larry Eugene Doby Sr. one day comes up to me and hands me a white envelope. He says, "Put this in your pocket." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Well, you'll open it, you'll find out." I said, "No, no, no. I want to know what it is now. Open it." So I open it. It's $1,000 check for
Uh-huh.
Project Pride from Larry Doby Sr. I said, "Look, I'm not cashing this because you're on our board of directors. You help with our SAT program. You've done enough for us. I'm not taking it." And Doby now says, "Oh, the white boy is telling the black boy again where he can spend his money. Is that what this is all about?" I said, "Don't start. I'll take the money." And
Well,
we used it.
well, Jerry, you're such a New Jersey and Newark guy. What are you doing in Nevada?
Oh, that happened. I was going to retire. The retirement was a fake, by the way. We did it. We had 1,200 people at a dinner. We had senators, congressmen. We even had some of the staff there. I mean, it was a spectacular dinner um, in West Orange, New Jersey, and Um, now I know I'm going to retire. I sign a contract. I go to see the guy who owns the papers, Donald Newhouse. I said, Donald, I think just figured a way I can make as much money as I'm making now between my pensions, and you got to do something for me. He said, well, what do you want? I said, make me columnist emeritus. He said, what does a columnist emeritus do? I said, any damn thing he wants to do. Who the hell knows? He said, well, how much do you want? What do you do? I said, I'll still do the Triple Crown races. I'll do the Super Bowl. I'll write current events. You know, I got a few opinions. He said, yeah, I know that. I said,
Yes.
okay. So all that I'll do, and you'll give me. He said, how much do you want? So now I'm playing movie scene. Right, take a pad, hand it to him. He said, I'm not going to pay you that. I'll pay you half. I said, why do you think I wrote the number down?
So, but that doesn't still answer why Nevada?
Well, we had to go somewhere. I was getting older, and she was tired. You know, I owe her. I mean, she went through all that 46 years of this crap with me. So we went to Arizona. She had it in her head she wanted to live in Arizona. So I said, look, we'll take a vacation. We'll go to Arizona. The last thing I did was write the first half of my next book as a newspaper series, My Life in Journalism. And the second half of the book is not called that, it's called Through My Eyes. But the second half of the book is far better because I didn't have any space limitations. The first half of the book all appeared in the paper, you know, it was all 1,000 words each chapter. But anyway, we go to Arizona and we looked at a house. She liked it. I said, it looks okay. I'm not sure. We go around the corner and I see three cars on the lawn, three different lawns. I said, I'm not moving here. Uh-uh. We'll save our vacation. Uh, Boxing has introduced me to tens and tens, dozens of people in Vegas. When the blackout started, you know, that's why they put fights in Vegas. So, because you're only blacking out a desert at that time. So we'll go. Let's finish up in Vegas. I know some folks are, and I want to gamble a little bit. And okay, she's always been smarter than me, so I know it, and I gave up trying to figure out anything that I'm not supposed to know.
Well, you
You get
haven't
to the
mentioned her, but you haven't mentioned her by name,
Eileen,
Eileen.
Eileen, Eileen Leach Eisenberg. I will tell you a story about it. She and me, she and I, whatever, her and me, whatever. But I will tell you a story as soon as I finish this part. So uh, we get to Vegas. She said, I'm going to rent a car. I said, for what? You know, I'm going to gamble. We're only going to be here 2 days. We're going home. She said, well, I like to know if I want to go shopping. I should have known she's lying. She gets the car. She gets me up at 7:30. Well, let's get out. We got to move. Why? Well, we just should go. We got the sun is out. It's beautiful. We go about 50 blocks maybe. All of a sudden, she pulls into this real estate office.
Hmm.
She planned all the while to look for a house. It was the
Oh,
climate, not the way it is now, but the climate as it was that fascinated her. Because she doesn't gamble. I make up for both of us. So so we go. This guy, he's an absolute. He's a bad real estate guy. I tell him I want everything on one floor because I'm getting older now. That was 17 years ago. I went to school in Newark. I can't tell you how much 17 from 60 from 93 is, but that's what I was. And he's showing us houses that have steep stairs, 3 floors. I said, I told you one floor. Finally, he's taking us to show us one more house, the last day we're going to be here in the morning. She said, stop the car. She said, for the sale sign. Why do you take us here? Well, I don't have the account. She said, I want to look at the house. We get in, we look at the house. There is one step in the house from the garage to that, only step in the entire house. I like that. Then I look at the house. I can't see any place that I can call an office. We got a couple little bedrooms. She says, no, I got plans for the house. She hires an architect and we buy the house. We get a decent price for it because this whole room, which you can't see, is the family room. That's my office. And it was only a few feet, originally. We break down walls, we move it back. We move it back toward the pool. Then she puts in, takes the living room, moves it 10 feet back toward the pool. Then we do a whole new wing on it. It was 2,400 square when we started, 2,400 square feet. It is 3,600 square feet now.
Mm-hmm.
It's much too big for us. But we had little grandkids in, and they run through the house. And, okay. And she liked it so much. I said, she's entitled. I was on the road. I was here. All the things. And then she would go with me after she stopped working. And I kid her, she majored in retirement in college, but she had a very responsible job. She was assistant director of federal funds for the New York school system. And every day she proved she's smarter than me. And now at 93, with a walker and everything else, she's stronger than me. So two of us are not going anywhere.
Jerry, we have time for one more question to wrap this up. And that is, out of your 15 books, which one is it even possible to call one that's more special to you than another?
There are three that are special to me. When I was 88 years old, I was told I was a hack sports writer. Nobody's going to buy your novel. You spent your whole life. And you can't write a novel. My agent told me that. And I said, tell you what, I'm going to write a novel and I'm going to sell it. You're out of it. Okay, I'll sell it myself. I wrote a novel called After the Fire, Life in the Ruins of 1967. That was the New York riot, which I covered. Everybody in that book is a real person. They just changed the names. Everybody in Newark knows who they are. That was the big guessing game when it came out. But nobody else. That was special because it was a novel and I proved I could do it.
Yeah.
But the two books that were most special, every book was sort of special to me, but the two books are the last two books I've done. I did a book called Baseball, Nazis, and Nedick's Hot Dogs, growing up Jewish in 1930 in Newark. It was all about my family, my crazy family, my first love. The divorce came later. And mostly it's a love affair, a three-corner love affair. Baseball, my dad, who was a minor league ball player, and me. And the baseball guides us all through the, look, baseball isn't baseball anymore. It's money, it's greed, it's television. But what sport, when baseball was baseball, what sport was a law and order sport? We have same distance between all bases. Every time you get up, you risk 3 strikes, but you get 4 balls to make up your mind.
Okay.
That was baseball. And my dad was special. I don't know. I do the same. It's something it's dear. It's close to my heart as the three books I mentioned. I do a column on Memorial Day about my father.
Well,
and I thank God that he persevered and really, really, without raising raised his hand twice to me my whole life, without yelling at me. He saved my life and made me a man. He put me. I mean, when they put me in military school, I was going to run away. But I'll tell you, And I hated military. I went back and made a speech at my old military school 60 years after I graduated.
Wow.
And a speech started with, I must tell you the truth about this place. I know you all loved it. A lot of you didn't go to college. It's your alma mater now. I hated this place. And my hate has not abated. When I was here, I set the record for number of penalty tours. Every time you got a demerit, you had to walk in a square with the right, whether it rained, snowed, whatever, mud, whatever, you walked. And the carrot was, if you didn't get a demerit, you could go to town, which was 6 miles away, go to a movie. In 4 years, I got to see the town twice. The town is so small, I would have gotten lost in it nevertheless, because I was walking off penalty tours every single Monday that I was in school. And I told them that. And I said, but I learned one thing at this place. And for that, I thank the people. And now they say, all right, now give us a break, right? I'm going to thank everybody involved.
Well, Jerry, you know,
I got to tell you the last sentence. I learned here, if somebody says you can't do it, screw them, I'll do it.
I'm with you on that. And you know, we could go on probably for another 2 hours.
If you're done. That's all right.
But I did want to ask you because in terms of how many kids and grandkids do you have?
4 kids between us. We did that before we met. 9 grandchildren, 2 great grands. But if you got a moment, I would like to tell you one thing about my wife and me.
Yes, but I don't want to lose track of this. So, is anyone involved in the newspaper business?
I can't hear you.
Is anyone any of the kids, grandkids?
No.
Okay,
No.
I just wanted to get that out of the way.
But the thing they don't know I was in newspaper business. They think I was a towel man in a whorehouse. I wanted a more respectable position than me. But I do want to tell you this story.
Okay.
My guy who bar mitzvahs me, Dr. Joachim Prince, was the warm-up speaker for Martin Luther King on the Mall. Okay?
Wow.
And he hammered in my head 2 Hebrew words, tikkun olam, which means fix the world. Of course, we can't do that, but that's what he did. And that's why I had my charity football game, tikkun olam. Anyway, he bar mitzvahs me. Now I'm in my late 30s, and I'm walking down the street, and he sees me. He says, I need you. Whatever he wanted, I would do. I said, well, what do you need? I said, you need tickets to something? He said, no. You're like a half-baked celebrity because you're in Newark, because you're in the paper every day. Now this guy's a rabbi who was on the first Freedom Riders bus and wound up in a hospital.
Okay.
And he's now going to picket the Woolworth building over the lunch count sit-ins. And he said, you'll give them a little courage if they see you there. I'm taking 12. So we go there, we do it, and it's over. What I don't know is a woman I never met, didn't know she was on this earth, a beautiful black woman, is in Denmark, South Carolina, at a college, and she's at a lunch counter sit-in, and she's running away from the fire hoses. She's doing the same thing I did, and we don't know each other. One is alive, and that's my wife.
Now, do we get to meet Eileen?
Beg pardon?
Do we get to meet Eileen?
If you want to. I don't know. She's
Can you poke her head in for a minute so we can meet her?
Eileen?
Just for a minute.
Please come in here for a minute, please. I need you. I need you. Come here a minute.
My computer's about to die. Okay.
She walks slowly. She's 84. My child bride.
Oh.
Come here. Come here.
Who are all the people?
Give me a kiss.
Why?
Because I need one.
Oh.
Come on.
No.
You know, please.
What?
Come on. This is Eileen Izenberg, the love of my life.
Hi,
and the reason I'm still here.
He's
You may leave.
Oh, see, that's how he treats me. He calls me, he wants to give a fake kiss, and then he says, "You may leave."
you've had a lot to put up with all these years.
Arlene, I tell you.
Pauline, I'm going to turn off my computer one more time.
See, I didn't want to wave when I first came in because then he would turn around and look and say, "What are you doing here?"
So I let me. This is a great point to end.